Tigerclaw's Fury by Erin Hunter. Chapter 1. Kill him! Blind him! Drive him out of the forest. The wound in Tigerclaw's belly pulsed with agony, and he felt warm, sticky blood pooling beneath his paws. His clanmate's furious words seemed to be coming from a long way off, as if he were underwater, cocooned in peaceful cold. "You lost!" screeched a voice inside his head. "Beaten by kitty pets and fools." Tigerclaw felt his lip curl up in a snarl. "I lost this battle," he conceded silently. "But for as long as there is blood in my veins, I will not give up." "Tigerclaw," Bluestar meowed. "Have you anything to say in your defense?" The ThunderClan leader's blue-gray fur was streaked with blood, Tigerclaw's as well as her own, and her eyes were dull and unfocused. Tigerclaw felt a thrill of satisfaction from his actions. His careful plans had left her shattered and flailing inside. He knew a broken cat when he saw one. This was the end of Bluestar's leadership, even if he hadn't managed to take her last lives. The thought numbed the pain in his belly and gave strength to his trembling legs. "Defend myself to you, you gutless excuse for a warrior," he hissed. "What sort of leader are you? Keeping the peace with other clans? Helping them? Oh, yes. I know you barely punished Fireheart and Greystripe for feeding RiverClan, and you sent them to fetch WindClan home. I would have never shown such kitty pet softness. I would have brought back the days of TigerClan. I would have made ThunderClan great." "And how many cats would have died for it?" Bluestar replied softly. She shook herself, then lifted her head. "If you have nothing else to say, then I sentence you to exile," she declared. "You will leave ThunderClan territory now, and if any cat sees you here after sunrise tomorrow, they have my permission to kill you." "Kill me?" Fireclaw echoed. "I'd like to see any of them try." "Fireheart beat you!" Greystripe yelled. "Fireheart!" Tigerclaw slowly turned his head to look at the ginger kitty pet. "A warrior name will never make you forest-born, no matter what your clanmates tell you. Cross my path again, you stinking furball, and we'll see who's the stronger." Fireheart sprang up, tail lashing, even though one of his eyes was swollen shut from a blow from Tigerclaw's paw. "Any time, Tigerclaw," he spat. "No," Bluestar interrupted them. "No more fighting. Tigerclaw, leave my sight." Tigerclaw made himself stand up, in spite of the trembling that shook his paws. A fresh wave of blood oozed from his belly as the edges of the wound shifted. He heard gasps from the cats around him, but ignored them. Pain is nothing. Defeat is nothing. "Don't think I'm finished," he warned, staring at the battle-stunned faces around him. "I'll be a leader yet, and any cat who comes with me will be taken care of." He looked for his closest ally in ThunderClan, the cat who'd always told him that he should have been a leader by now. "Darkstripe?" The black-striped tabby stayed where he was, sitting among the warriors. "I trusted you, Tigerclaw," he whimpered. "I thought you were the finest warrior in the forest, but you plotted with that tyrant." Tigerclaw guessed. He was speaking of Broken Tail, the exiled ShadowClan leader who now lived in ThunderClan's camp. "But you said nothing to me, and now you expect me to come with you." He dropped his head, unable to meet Tigerclaw's gaze. "Traitor! You dare to defy me in front of all these cats? You'll pay for this with every hair on your pelt." Tigerclaw forced his fur to stay flat. "I needed Broken Tail's help to make contact with the rogue cats. If you choose to take this personally, that's your problem," he sniffed. He looked at another cat who'd listened to his plans, promised to stand by him when he brought clear, strong leadership to their clan. Longtail! The pale tabby almost leaped out of his skin. Come with you, Tigerclaw, into exile. He sounded horrified. No, I can't. I'm loyal to ThunderClan. You're a pathetic coward, more like. Tigerclaw screeched silently. He scanned the ranks of cats, looking for a hint of understanding, a recognition that this weak and kitty pet favoring clan was no place for a true warrior. What about you, Dustpelt? He growled. You'll have richer pickings with me than you ever will in ThunderClan. The young brown tabby got deliberately to his paws and picked his way through the surrounding cats until he stood in front of Tigerclaw. I looked up to you, he admitted. I wanted to be like you, but Redtail was my mentor. I owe him more than any cat, and you killed him. His eyes grew huge, and he started to shake. You killed him and betrayed the clan. I'd die rather than follow you. Redtail deserved to die. He was too much like Bluestar, always looking for peace and reconciliation. It was only luck that Oakheart didn't kill him before he got caught by the rockfall. Redtail was never going to survive that battle. Tigerclaw! Bluestar broke into his memories of dust and falling stones, and the bright red slash opening up in Redtail's throat. No more of this. Go now. Tigerclaw lifted his head and met her gaze. I'm going, but I'll be back. You can be sure of that. I'll have revenge on you all. He turned and walked away, gritting his teeth against the pain in his belly. I will not show them. I have been wounded. He paused as he drew level with Fireheart. And as for you, he growled, keep your eyes open, Fireheart. Keep your ears pricked. Keep looking behind you, because one day I'll find you, and then you'll be crow food. You're crow food now, Fireheart snapped, but the stench of fear rose from him. Tigerclaw stared into the warrior's wide green eyes. You know already that I will kill you one day. Your last breath will be gasped beneath my paws. Your last drop of blood will be spilled on my fur. Stones will break, and the sky will fall when we meet in our final battle. With a flick of his tail that felt as if it was ripping his belly apart, he walked across the clearing without looking back. From inside the nursery, he heard the tiny mewls of his son and daughter, Bramblekit and Tawnykit, quickly hushed by their mother, Goldenflower. I will come back for you, Tigerclaw vowed. He will not leave his kids to be raised in this clan of weaklings. They deserve to learn from his example, to model themselves on his courage and skill in battle. Some skill you show today, came the voice in his head again. Thistleclaw would have clouded you over the ears for letting yourself get beaten by a kitty pet and a star-crazed old she-cat. Thistleclaw wouldn't have dared to take on the leader of his clan. Tigerclaw lashed back. If he hadn't let Bluestar become deputy in the first place, everything would be different. He would have chosen me to succeed him, and ThunderClan would be as strong as we deserve. He pushed his way through the gorse tunnel, hardly noticing the thorns that clutched at his blood-matted fur. The barricade had been ripped and scattered by fleeing cats, cats who had sworn to fight alongside Tigerclaw until he had killed Bluestar, on the promise that he would make them his foremost warriors in the new ThunderClan. Tigerclaw spat on the dusty earth. He should have known better than to rely on those half-trained rogues. Only a forest-born cat had the true instincts of a warrior. The ShadowClan outlaws had disappointed him too, made soft by moons of surviving alone, too easily cowed by cats fighting to defend their home. Tigerclaw needed some time with them, to remind them of the training they had received under Broken Star. The former Shadow Clan leader may have been criticized for asking too much of his warriors, but he had made his clan the most feared and powerful in the forest. Who could judge him for that? And Tigerclaw might still have won if River Clan hadn't turned up at the tipping point of the battle. Mistyfoot and Leopardfur bounding in to rescue the clan cats, who had been their sworn enemies just a few moons earlier. Why did the clans show so much mercy to one another? What did it matter to River Clan if Thunder Clan lost its leader? Tigerclaw felt his hackles rise. Of course, it was in River Clan's interest to keep Bluestar in command, weak and addled and unable to keep her grip on sunny rocks. It was probably Crooked Star's greatest fear to have Tigerclaw in charge of his closest neighbors. The dappled shadows cast by breeze-stirred oak and beech leaves gave way to cool, damp gloom beneath the pine trees that bordered Two Lake Place. Tigerclaw paused for a moment to check that no cat was following him. But the woods were silent apart from the call of a blackbird and a tree branch resting against another with a soft creak. He let himself sink down on a patch of moss, letting out a grunt of pain. He craned his neck to study the wound on his belly. Fireheart had been lucky to get so close to him. But if he'd really wanted to hurt Tigerclaw, he should have gone for his neck. Tigerclaw dragged some loose moss against the wound, hissing as he pressed it hard to stem the bleeding. His head swam with pain, and he fought off a wave of blackness that rose behind his eyes. He pictured the clan that he had left behind, battle-bruised and cowering in the dust. Did he really want to command warriors that were so nearly beaten by a half-trained patrol of rogues? Fireheart had taken all the credit for winning, as always, and every cat had been hanging on his words, gazing in doe-eyed admiration. If they were so willing to listen to a kitty pet, they didn't deserve a leader such as Tigerclaw. How dare Bluestar cast him out? Had she forgotten how many times he had won battles for ThunderClan, found food for his clanmates, defended the borders against their enemies? They owed him everything, but in the end they had treated him worse than a lice-riddled fox. He could have been the best leader ThunderClan had ever known. Better than your father, Pine Star, purred the voice in his ear. He betrayed his clan, betrayed you, when he left to become a kitty pet. You would never walk away from your clanmates if you were their leader. The moss under his paw started to overflow with blood. With a grunt, Tigerclaw cast it aside and looked around for another clump. There was no more soft green moss, but he spotted some dry leaf mulch within reach. He clawed it against his belly, packing it into the cut. He felt a burst of triumph against his surroundings. The forest had tried to deny him moss, but he had found something else. Tigerclaw half sat up, pricking his ears as he stared into the trees. As clear as stars, his path stretched out before him. There was more than one cat in this forest, more than one chance to become a leader. His destiny must lie elsewhere. Tigerclaw would return to ThunderClan only to crush his former clanmates in battle. He would not fail again. Chapter 2. The air beneath the pine trees grew colder, and the ground under Tigerclaw started to feel damp. He licked it to get some moisture, then heaved himself to his paws. He couldn't stay here. The evening border patrol would be coming this way soon. He didn't want to see the pity in the eyes of his clanmates if they found him wounded and exhausted, still inside ThunderClan territory. Wincing with every step, Tigerclaw limped deeper into the pine trees. He stayed away from Two Lake Place, with its curious kitty pets and stray dogs. Instead, he headed for the wooden den beneath a tall fence of pine trunks, where the two legs that cut down trees came in the daytime. He squeezed through the fence, leaving a smear of blood on the striped wooden post. There was a gap, the height of a rabbit, beneath the wooden den. Tigerclaw crawled into the shadows and lay full length on the earth. There was a faint hint of mouse from further under the den, but Tigerclaw didn't have the strength to pursue the scent, let alone a scampering piece of prey. Where is the moss that lines your nest in the warrior's den? Where are the feathers? Is this how your life will be from now on, huddled on the bare dirt, starving because you are too weak to feed yourself? Tigerclaw's belly rumbled, but he pressed his cheek deeper into the soil to block out the sound. Right now, sleep was more important than food. Once he had rested, once he had eaten, then he could begin the destruction of ThunderClan. He dreamed that he was on fire, scorched by the claw marks that Fireheart had left in his skin. He thrashed with his paws, but sleep held him fast, clutching him in a semi-conscious daze. He was dimly aware of the daylight seeping in from outside, but before he could rouse himself and go out in search of food, it seemed that night was falling again, shrinking Tigerclaw's world in a blur of pain and tortured sleep. He lashed out blindly at the screeches from the mist that surrounded him. He felt claws rake his fur and teeth snapping close to his ears. He whirled, stumbling on legs that felt heavy and sore, but there was nothing except damp gray clouds behind him. "Too slow," hissed the voice. "Don't let Fireheart and Bluestar catch you. They'll crush you like a bug." "Never!" roared Tigerclaw. He woke with a start, breathless and writhing on his back. His belly burned like fire, and his claws were unsheathed, clogged with dirt. He crawled out from beneath the wooden den into a cool, pale dawn. How many days had he lain there? 1, 2, more? His vision blurred for a moment, and he shook his head to clear it. His mouth was as dry and sore as if he had swallowed feathers. So he limped over to a puddle that lay in a muddy rut close to the fence. The water was black and brackish, but he forced himself to lap until his throat had stopped hurting. A blackbird pecked at the ground farther along the fence. Tigerclaw gathered his haunches beneath him and crept towards the bird, testing each of his legs. He felt weak, but a careful check of his belly showed that the wound had stopped bleeding, and the edges were starting to crust over with dark red scabs. As long as he didn't stretch too much, he should be able to hunt. Better to die from hunting than from letting myself starve. As he drew closer to the bird, he stepped onto a heap of pine needles that crackled. The blackbird let out a squawk and flapped noisily into the air. Tigerclaw cursed under his breath and sat down. He lifted the ruffled, dusty fur on his chest. It tasted of blood and soil. He spat, then turned and stared into the shadows beneath the wooden den. He'd been aware of rustlings during his restless sleep, the muffled squeaks of mice, and a mouth-watering scent in the musty air. It could be a cramped and difficult place to hunt, but no worse than some of the bramble thickets he'd scoured before. Crouching low, feeling the wound in his belly strain, Tigerclaw slipped under the den. The soil rose up on the far side, blocking out the light. Tigerclaw headed for the thickest shadows, feeling his whiskers quiver as he picked up the scent of tiny furred creatures. He paused for a moment to let his eyes adjust to the half-light, then lunged towards the tiny twin glints that gave away a mouse staring back at him, terrified. There was a satisfying fat crunch under his paws, a high-pitched squeak cut short, and Tigerclaw buried his muzzle in the warm blood and fur of his fresh kill. He saw no need to thank Starkland for his prey. It was his catch, his alone. The mouse sent strength surging through his legs, and Tigerclaw emerged, blinking into the light. Shaking loose soil from his pelt, he squeezed beneath the wooden posts and set off through the pine trees at an uneven trot, gritting his teeth against the pain in his belly. He was outside ThunderClan's landmarks here, but there was precious little undergrowth, so a passing patrol would spot him from a long way off. The tall wooden fences and red stone walls that marked the edge of Two Lake Place bloomed through the trees. The trunks thinned out, and brambles and dense clumps of ferns began tangling around Tigerclaw's paws. He lowered his head and began sniffing where fronds had been bent back by a passing creature. There! Barely a fox length from ThunderClan border, he picked up the acrid, fear-stained scent of the cats who had fought alongside him in the attack. Fought? More like turned tail, like frightened kits, came the voice in Tigerclaw's head. You were a fool to trust them. Tigerclaw flattened his ears. I had no choice. But now that I am free from my bonds to ThunderClan, things will be different. Stepping carefully through the thick grass, Tigerclaw followed the scents along the very edge of Two Lake Place. Splashes of blood left a visible trail, and he hoped the cats were not too badly wounded. He didn't have time to nurse anyone. These pitiful creatures were weak enough already. He kept one ear pricked towards ThunderClan territory, listening for a patrol. The sun was high overhead, the shadows at the foot of the two-lake boundary barely wide enough to conceal him. Tigerclaw guessed that his former clanmates would be resting after morning patrols, sharing a fresh kill before setting out again. His belly growled at the thought of food, but he forced himself to keep going. He wouldn't be caught taking prey that belonged to ThunderClan. The rumble of the thunder path drifted through the trees, and the scent of scared cats was muffled by the stench of monsters and their foul black breath. Tigerclaw forced his way into a solid clump of brambles, guessing that if he were frightened and wounded, he'd seek the thickest cover. He stiffened as he heard tiny whispers ahead of him. Keep still! Someone's coming. Has the ThunderClan patrol found us? We can't stay here and be trapped like rabbits. Hush! They'll hear us. ThunderClan burst through the wall of thorns with a yowl. 5 pairs of eyes stared at him in horror. Then, one by one, they blinked and lost the sheen of terror. Tigerclaw! Meowed a scrawny brown Tom. You survived. No thanks to you, Clawface. Tigerclaw snarled. We were going to come back for you once our wounds had healed, protested a broad-shouldered white Tom with one black forepaw. His name was Blackfoot, and like Clawface, he had been a Shadow Clan warrior loyal to their leader, Broken Star, before he had been taken prisoner and his followers driven out of the clan. 2 other former Shadow Clan warriors, a brown tabby named Stumpytail and a gray and brown she-cat named Tanglebur, stood up and stepped alongside Tigerclaw to brush their tails against him. I'm so pleased to see you, purred Tanglebur, but the row of fur pricking along her spine told Tigerclaw that she was lying. All of these cats, including the former stray Snag, a huge ginger Tom who lingered at the back of the makeshift den, watching with wary amber eyes, were terrified to see Tigerclaw risen from the dead. They knew they had failed him, had let themselves be beaten by a bunch of queens and elders in an unguarded camp. Tigerclaw breathed in their fierce scent and felt a thrill of satisfaction. These cats would do anything he wanted. He forced his long claws to stay sheathed, pushed down the urge to rip their ears for leaving him to face his former clanmates alone. These were the only allies he had for now, and while they were scared of him, and in his stead, he could shape them exactly as he wanted. He looked around. Where's Mowgli? He had found the green-eyed brown Tom along the loners in Two Lake Place, spotting at once the potential in his sleek muscles and hard, unflinching gaze. Tigerclaw had vowed to make Mowgli a senior warrior if he fought alongside him, and the brown Tom had lapped up his promises as hungrily as any forest-born cat. Stumpytail shrugged. I don't know. He got his ears clawed pretty harshly by that brown ThunderClan apprentice. Brackenpaw, I think he was called. We haven't seen him since. Tigerclaw curled his lip. Beaten? By an apprentice? He hoped he had been wrong about Mowgli. Clearly, he needed more training, more encouragement to fight to the limits of his strength, even if his opponent still had kitten fluff around his ears. Clawface limped forward with a scrap of fur and meat in his jaws. He dropped it at Tigerclaw's feet. I caught this mouse earlier, he mewed. You can have the rest if you want. Tigerclaw eyed the pathetic piece of fresh kill. Would he be shown the weakness if he admitted to his hunger and ate it? Or should he take advantage of these cats offering to feed and shelter him? What would a clan leader do? Blue Star will look for the weakest elder and give them the fresh kill, purred the voice. But is that the kind of leader you want to be? Tigerclaw bent his head and devoured the mouse loin in a single bite. He looked up, swiping his tongue around his lips. We'll need more than that to survive. Who is the least wounded among you? Tanglebird raised her tail. I have a bite on my flank, but it's healing fast. She glanced over her shoulder, and Snag's fur was thick enough to save him from any deep scratches. The loner padded out of the shadows. I'll hunt if you want, he rumbled. Tigerclaw nodded. Good, you too. Bring back at least 2 pieces each of fresh kill. Tanglebird's eyes widened, but she didn't say anything. Well done, you're learning, thought Tigerclaw. The 2 cats threaded their way out of the brambles. Tigerclaw, your belly seems to be bleeding, mewed Blackfoot hesitantly. He stretched out his neck and sniffed at the sticky scarlet fur on Tigerclaw's side. It's nothing, snapped Tigerclaw. It'll heal over in a couple of days. Blackfoot stepped back. Those ThunderClan cats fought more fiercely than I expected, he admitted. Beside him, Clawface nodded, especially that so-called kitty pet, Fireheart. Blackfoot went on. He may have been born in Two Lake Place, but he's sure learned how to fight like a warrior. He is a kitty pet! Tigerclaw spat. Don't ever speak of him as a warrior. He has no right to be in the forest, no right to speak to Blue Star as if the blood of the clans runs in his veins. He turned away and paced in a tight circle, flicking his tail. I will find more cats and teach you how to fight properly. And then we will take on ThunderClan again, and Fireheart will die. Chapter 3. Tigerclaw opened his eyes to thin gray light filtering between the brambles. It was not quite dawn, but the air was warm and stuffy from the sleeping cats around him. Moving carefully in order not to disturb Clawface, who was pressed against his spine, Tigerclaw eased himself up and stepped out of the thicket. The thunder path was silent, and the forest smelled clear and green. He peered through the trees, recognizing, even in the half-light, which trunks held the border marks for ThunderClan territory. He felt his fur start to rise as he pictured Fireheart curled in the warrior's den, dreaming of victory. Sleep peacefully while you can, kitty pet. There was a crackle of leaves behind him, and Snag appeared, shaking dust from his thick pelt. Have you spotted a patrol? He asked. No, it's too early. Tigerclaw turned and looked towards the thunder path, just visible between the tree trunks. We can't stay here. We don't want to attract attention from ThunderClan, and we need more space for hunting. Wake the others. We'll leave now, before the dawn patrol begins. Snag vanished back into the brambles, leaving Tigerclaw alone in the woods, where he had been born. I will come back, he vowed, but only when I am strong enough to crush Fireheart and ThunderClan along with him. Tanglebird was yawning as she pushed her way out of the brambles, but as soon as she saw Tigerclaw, her mouth snapped shut and she lifted her head. Where are we going? Tigerclaw flicked his tail towards the Thunderpath. We'll cross over and skirt the edge of ShadowClan until we reach the wild part of the forest. Stumpytail looked alarmed. What if a patrol catches us? We won't be welcome inside ShadowClan's borders. The sun hasn't risen yet. There won't be any patrols around, meowed Blackfoot. Tigerclaw led the cats through the long grass between the edge of the trees and the smooth black thunderpath. The river of stone was silent, still reeking of monsters, but damp with dew, making it quite cool and pleasant to walk on. The cats trotted across and plunged into the grass on the far side. None of them said a word as they entered the close-growing pine trees. Tigerclaw saw Blackfoot's fur stand on end, and Clawface's eyes stretched wide as he scanned for hostile former clanmates. But the woods were as silent here as they had been on the other side of the thunderpath. The cats crept undisturbed along the fences and the walls of Two Lake Place until they reached a tangled clump of ancient trees with thick glossy leaves and drooping purple and scarlet blooms. This is the farthest corner of the territory, Clawface whispered. These bushes came from Two Lake Place, and they're so difficult to get through that ShadowClan uses them as a defense against the wild part of the woods. They'll protect us just as well, mewed Tigerclaw. There must be some way through. Blackfoot walked along the foot of the branches, which dipped close to the ground. There is a way, he muttered. I got through once when I was an apprentice. Tanglebird twitched her ears. You were lucky you made it back. Who knows what could have happened to you on the other side? Snag blinked. It's just more trees, he meowed. What are you imagining? A clan of foxes and badgers waiting to rip your fur off? Tanglebird flicked her tail. I was a loyal ShadowClan warrior, she huffed. It wasn't my business to know what went on beyond the clan boundaries. Well, that's changed, hasn't it? Growled Tigerclaw. Come on. Brushing past Blackfoot, he climbed over a gnarled silver branch and wriggled into the corner of the tree. He couldn't see through the dense leaves to the other side, but there was a surprising amount of room among the twisted trunks. He heard the others follow him and continued to scramble forward, ignoring the tearing pains in his belly. Soon he was surrounded by shiny leaves again, but he forced a way through and plunged into clear space on the other side. The wild part of the woods stretched out in front of him, looking more like ThunderClan than ShadowClan territory, with ancient moss-clad oaks and dappled ash trees rather than straight rows of pines. The other cats lined up beside him, panting. So this is our territory now, murmured Clawface. Blackfoot pricked his ears. That fallen tree over there looks as if it could be a den, he meowed. He bounded over the mulch-covered ground, leaping twigs and clumps of fungus growing in the damp soil. He vanished behind the fallen oak for a moment, then reappeared on top of the trunk. It's perfect, he yowled. Come and see. Tigerclaw followed the others as they ran like excited kids to explore the oak tree. Finding shelter wasn't a challenge. Even hunting would be easy here, with nothing but the occasional bold kitty pet for competition. They needed to begin battle training as soon as possible, and Tigerclaw needed to find others to join them, because he wasn't going to trust victory to these few cats again. When he reached the far side of the fallen tree, Tanglebird and Stumpytail were already dragging Ivy out of a scoop in the ground. This will make a great nest, meowed Tanglebird through a mouthful of trailing vines. Snag trotted around the dying branches of the tree. There's a puddle of water here, he announced. It tastes fresh enough. Blackfoot looked at Clawface. Shall we hunt and get started on a fresh kill pile? Clawface nodded, but Tigerclaw stepped forward and stopped him in his tracks. This isn't a game of many clans, he warned. You don't think I've given up on taking over ThunderClan? Blue Star is weaker than she has ever been, and she weakens the whole clan by putting so much faith in the kitty pet. As soon as we are strong enough, we will attack again. There was a flash of uncertainty in the other cat's eyes, and Tigerclaw noticed Blackfoot glance at his belly, as if the white Tom was concerned that Tigerclaw's wound would never heal enough to let him go into battle. Are you sure these cats know that you are in charge? Whispered the voice in his head. If they don't believe they need you as much as they need food and shelter, you are nothing to them. Tigerclaw unsheathed his claws and let them sink into the soft earth. Hunt. Prepare nests. And make sure we cannot be seen by Shadow Clan patrols, he ordered. Tomorrow we start our training. Snag, don't be afraid to use your weight against your opponent. If he can't breathe, he'll be easier to hit. Tigerclaw put his paw and nudged Snag forward so that he was hanging over Clawface, who was starting to look worried. Stumpytail pricked his ears. But now Snag is balancing on 3 paws, so I could knock him over, couldn't I? He suggested. Yes, but be careful where he lands. You don't want to crush Clawface. Tigerclaw stepped back and watched as Snag swiped his paw down towards Clawface. At the same moment, Stumpytail barged into his hunches. The big ginger Tom lurched sideways with a hiss, leaving Clawface to scramble free on the other side. While Snag was on the ground, the other 2 cats leaped on him. Much better, meowed Tigerclaw. He scanned the trees. Where are Blackfoot and Tanglebird? They should have been back from hunting ages ago. They had been in the wild woods for 3 sunrises. All the cats were healing well now. Even Tigerclaw's wounds had stopped oozing whenever he stretched it, and their temporary den had provided good shelter during a couple of heavy rainfalls. The trees were lush and heavy all around them, and hunting was easy as prey came out to eat the seeds and nuts that had been washed down by the rain. Stumpytail glanced at Clawface. They'll be back soon, he mewed. Tigerclaw pounced on the note of uncertainty in his voice. Where are they? He growled. They haven't crossed the border, I promise, mewed Clawface, his ears flattening in distress. But we've been taking turns on patrol on our side, looking for some sign that Shadow Clan is all right. We're worried about our clanmates. We've been here for a while and haven't heard we're seeing any border patrols. What if something terrible has happened? Tigerclaw narrowed his eyes. Why should that matter to you? They are not your clanmates now. Stumpytail lifted his head. But they were close to us once. We have not stopped thinking about them just because we no longer live among them. There was a note of defiance in his words that Tigerclaw appreciated. That kind of loyalty could serve you well, commented the voice inside his head. I'll go look for them, he meowed. Clawface's eyes widened. You won't punish them, will you? Fear is the key. That depends on what they have done. Tigerclaw padded away from the training area, a clear, smooth space defined by a tree stump, a row of brambles, and a tiny, gritty stream. He plunged into the undergrowth and followed a half-flattened trail to the wall of tangled trees. He guessed the former Shadow Clan cats wouldn't spend time patrolling here because it was impossible to see through the dense green leaves. So he trotted along the edge of the barrier until it yielded to more open woodland, where gnarled mossy oaks gave way to tall, whisker-straight pine trees. It wasn't long before he spotted Blackfoot's white pelts slinking between the trunks. Tanglebird was a few steps behind, better hidden among the foliage. Tigerclaw stayed where he was, just within scenting distance of the Shadow Clan border marks, and waited. They seemed to be following the line of the border, not crossing over, but close enough to be seen by any passing cats. They were talking to each other in low, anxious voices. "Did you forget about battle training?" Tigerclaw meowed when they were within earshot. Both cats stared at him, guilt shining in their eyes. We were just on our way," Blackfoot stammered. "Don't lie," mewed Tigerclaw, padding up to them and sniffing their fur. "You smell of ShadowClan more than you did already, I mean. Who have you been talking to?" Tanglebird flattened her ears. "We didn't cross the border, I promise. We just wanted to see how they were." Tigerclaw flicked his tail. How who were? He wanted to force them to admit that their loyalties still lie with their former clan, that he would never be able to trust them, that all his training had been for nothing. "You should kill them where they stand," encouraged the voice. Blackfoot stepped forward, and Tigerclaw almost flinched as he realized the white Tom was as tall and broad-chested as he was. "We have done nothing wrong," Blackfoot insisted. "We just wanted to know why there were so few border patrols. We met Dawncloud and Rowanberry hunting on their own. There is a terrible sickness in ShadowClan, and almost every warrior has been affected. Without hunting patrols, the whole clan is starving." "The sickness came from the rats at the carry-on place," Tanglebird put in. "Runny Nose is doing everything he can, but there are too many infected cats." "Why do you think this is your problem?" Tigerclaw asked mildly. "Your clanmates will want nothing to do with you because of your connection to Broken Star." Blackfoot's eyes flashed. "I was loyal to Broken Star because he was the leader of my clan, just as every Shadow Clan warrior should have been. I am still a Shadow Clan cat, whatever happens." Tanglebird nodded. "These cats that are sick and starving, they are my kin, my friends. I may have left the territory, but I can't forget them." For a moment, Tigerclaw felt a stab of envy. He didn't miss a single one of his clanmates, not treacherous Darkstripe or Longtail, nor the weak and fawning kitty pet lovers among the other warriors. Was he going to lose control of Blackfoot and Tanglebird because of their sentimental attachment to cats who no longer cared about them? "You can't challenge their loyalty," warned the voice, "so use it to your own ends. If ShadowClan is as weak as they say, it poses no threat to your destiny. Remember, mercy is a sign of great power." Tiger's Claw blinked. "For your own safety, I forbid you to enter ShadowClan's territory," he meowed. "But I want to hear for myself what is happening in their camp. We will wait for the next patrol and I will speak to them." They didn't have to wait long. A slow, stumbling crunch of twigs and dry leaves announced the approach of a patrol. Regular pauses told Tigerclaw they were renewing border marks, as if scent alone would keep the ravaged clan safe. 3 cats stumbled into view between the tree trunks. Tigerclaw narrowed his eyes, recognizing Fernshade, Deerfoot, and Boulder. The big gray Tom, who had been born in Two Lake Place, spotted the waiting cats first and bounded forward. "Tanglebird! Blackfoot! Rowanberry told me she had seen you. What are you doing here?" Boulder's eyes were bright, but his ribs showed beneath his pelt and his flanks were tucked up with hunger. "We live here now," Tanglebird meowed, gesturing with her tail in the direction of the fallen oak. "Stumpytail and Clawface are with us, and Tigerclaw." Boulder's eyes narrowed. "We've heard rumors of an attack on ThunderClan," he meowed. "Was that you?" Blackfoot flicked his tail. "That's not what we wanted to talk to you about. What is happening in ShadowClan? Are you really dying from the sickness?" Fernshade padded forward. She looked older than Tigerclaw remembered, her tortoiseshell fur patched and clumpy, and one eye stuck shut with weeping yellow ooze. "We have been sick from the rats before, but never this bad," she rasped. "Runny Nose hasn't slept for a quarter moon trying to find enough herbs for us all." "Why are you telling them this?" snarled Deerfoot, shouldering his way between his clanmates. "These cats are no longer our clanmates. They turned their back on the warrior code when they chose to follow Broken Star." He glared at Blackfoot and Tanglebur, then let his gaze rest on Tigerclaw. "And this cat is not to be trusted," he growled softly. "What are you planning, Tigerclaw? I thought your clanmates would have clawed your fur off by now." Tigerclaw forced his pelt to lie flat. "I chose to leave," he meowed. "ThunderClan is ruled by a kitty pet now. That Blue Star listens to Fireheart before anyone else." Deerfoot's nostrils flared. "I can't imagine you giving up that easily, Tigerclaw." Tanglebird rested her nose against Fernshade's flank. "You look so tired," she mewed sadly. "Would you like us to hunt for you?" "No!" snapped Tigerclaw and Deerfoot at the same time. "We can hunt for ourselves," insisted the ShadowClan cat. "You owe these cats nothing," hissed Tigerclaw. "I've heard enough. Come, follow me." He turned, and for a moment his heart beat faster as he wondered if Tanglebird and Blackfoot would obey. There was a brief silence. Then he heard paw steps padding after him. "May StarClan light your path," Fernshade called. "And yours." "And yours," Tanglebird whispered in reply. "We meet again, Tigerclaw," snarled the ginger cat. "And this time I won't let you live." "Really, Fireheart?" Tigerclaw sneered. "Have you forgotten that you're nothing but a soft-bellied kitty pet?" He launched himself forward, claws raking the air in search of the orange pelt. All around him he could hear ThunderClan cats yowling in fury, and the thud and scrape of paws as blows were landed. In his dream, Tigerclaw looked desperately around, trying to see who was fighting alongside him. Was he supposed to take on the whole of his former clan alone? But instead of well-trained ranks of warriors matching his strikes, there was nothing but shadows. Shadows filled with shrieks and the crash of paw steps, but thin black air nonetheless. Tigerclaw felt Fireheart's claws find the half-healed wound on his belly, and he leaped sideways, snapping his teeth where the Tom's neck should be. His jaws closed on a mouthful of dusty leaves, and Tigerclaw woke, coughing and churning the leaf mold with his paws. "Are you all right?" Clawface asked sleepily from beside him. "Fine," growled Tigerclaw. He stood up and left the nest, shaking the bad dream from his pelt. If he had to fight every battle alone, he would not give up. Even with an army of shadows, he would still win. He paused. He had dreamed of shadows fighting alongside him, screeching and matching him blow for blow. He tipped back his head and looked up at the milky sky between the branches. Was it an omen from StarClan? Would it be ShadowClan that helped him destroy Fireheart?